Hey everyone, it's Matt, aka Tech Ranger, and today I wanted to go over some of the settings in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered that I think you should change. There may be a few of these that you may have already known about, but maybe there's a few that you don't know about yet, or you just haven't really messed around with. Screen space reflections, controller sensitivity, autosaves, camera motion. So if you enjoy the video, leave a like down below, comment down below with what kind of settings you're using, and with all that, let's take a look at some of the settings for Oblivion Remastered on the Xbox. Like with most games nowadays, when you load it up for the first time, the game will actually present you with some settings to change just to get you started. When you get to the main options, there's a lot in the gameplay section. At the top of the list, there is difficulty, and the default is Adept. This will probably be good for most people, especially if you're familiar with a game like Skyrim. Oblivion does skew a little bit more in the RPG direction as far as picking a birth sign, picking a class. You can always knock this difficulty down if you need to, or increase it. But I will say, like the Adept, it seems, especially if you're going through the arena storyline, it seems pretty good. Like the opponents are a sufficient difficulty to where you're not just owning every single encounter, and the character I'm playing isn't necessarily a warrior character, so hopefully that helps a bit if you're not sure. Next thing I would look at are autosaves, and I think you probably want to turn at least one of these off. It's nice to have some options with the autosaves if there's an unexpected death, but at the same time you also don't want it autosaving at a bad time. In terms of performance, I'm not sure that it really has any effect right now, at least on the Xbox. There is like that little bit of a flicker when you're going from like early part of the day to another part of the day. Good news is that doesn't seem to be tied to an autosave, so if you want to keep that one on, you can. Controller sensitivity was a little high when you actually got into the game. It just felt a little floaty, so I'd probably recommend knocking that down a little bit. The tutorial section in the game is actually a great way to test your sensitivity. I would lower it and just see how it feels, especially like shooting a bow, and then go from there. My horizontal controller sensitivity is at 40, so I can move around left to right fast enough, but not too fast. For vertical, I have it a little lower at 35, that way I'm not moving up and down super fast. This actually rolls right into the next one, which is aim assist. It does have an effect if you're using melee as well. When you have this on in melee or with a bow, when you hover over a target, it'll give you a little bit of a tug. And the relative zoom sensitivity is essentially just for when you're focusing with a bow. When you drop that number more from 100, that means your sensitivity is going to be even lower for something like aiming with a bow. If the sliders are at 100, it's just going to match your regular sensitivity, which might be really fast if you're zoomed in. I like to have the slider at about 75, and when you're zoomed in or focusing, you might want to try lowering the slider a bit more. If we go a little bit further down to the accessibility settings, having the blood splatter on can help the combat feel a little bit more satisfying. There's also a low health indicator, which is like a red around your screen when your health gets low. I find this is helpful, especially if you have controller vibration off, because there might be some times when you're getting hit and you don't realize that your health is really low, and then you die. The last one in this section is the camera motion on or off. This is that head bobbing effect, and it will be different depending on the FOV that you pick, which we'll get into later in the video, but it is a little bit different in third person with that new sprinting animation, so it might be worth trying out if you're familiar with it in other games and like it. A quick note on audio, I usually use the headphone settings just because I usually play with headphones. However, there are different levels for a lot of the different sounds in the game. Probably recommend turning the footstep audio down because it's a little loud. And I say that because the footstep audio sound being high also accounts for you and your footsteps. As far as graphics modes go, I did touch on this a little bit in the first video I made on Oblivion Remastered, but essentially the performance mode is going to try and target 60 FPS, whereas the quality mode is going to target 30 but have a higher resolution in most cases. For me, I think the performance mode is really good in this game. When you're outdoors, that seems to be when the frame rate hitches or dips a little bit. When indoors or like in a cave, it's pretty solid. The game looks so good already, I'm not sure that quality is necessary to try for most people. On the Series S, you might be just on the quality mode. Higher resolution, better shadow quality too, but at the cost of frame rate. Moving on though, there is FOV, which I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with at this point. And then you do have an FOV for first person and third person, similar to a game like Starfield. I know some viewers of the channel actually do like playing with a lower FOV just for the immersiveness of the game. I tend to skew a little bit more towards 90, and then for a third person FOV, I like to open it up a little bit more to 95. Motion blur is another setting I would look at. The effect can be cool, but it does give you that soap opera effect, so it might not be everyone's cup of tea. This is probably one that you're going to want to have off, but feel free to mess around with it. It can look cool with the graphics in this game. However, I did notice something with that. The effect on the Oblivion gates looks a lot different with motion blur on, and then when you're actually going into the Oblivion gates, those little sparks and embers that fly around, you'll notice that they look like lines. Probably not intentional, but I wanted to mention it in case you end up messing around with motion blur. And then we have screen space reflection, and I think the best way to show this is looking at bodies of water in the game. You'll notice more static images in the screen space reflections off, and when they're on, you'll notice more of a natural reflection in the water. There's a good chance that most won't really notice this effect if you have it on or off. Hopefully this helps just illustrate that for you. There might be a slight performance hit around bodies of water, although I couldn't really tell if that was the case or not, on the Series X at least. Under the interface settings, you'll see the dialogue camera transition. This is essentially that zoom whenever you go and talk to somebody. If you have this off, it's more of a static, just, hey, this person's talking, but your camera is still going to be locked in front of the person. And it's cool that this feature is here. I like that you have an option if you want to incorporate some of the FOV changes you might have made, instead of kind of awkwardly being in an NPC's face. Lastly, you do want to look at your controller settings as well, specifically the bindings. You can actually change any of the keybinds here, but the thing that you should probably look at are these actions at the bottom. There's only ever so many buttons on a controller, but you can choose how each of the D-pad functions work and use it kind of like a Skyrim menu. The open system one is cool because it just brings up the settings menu that we're looking at right now, and will always go to the last used screen that you were in when you were looking at the menu. So if the last thing you looked at was the save and load menu, this is what's going to pop up. If your goal is just a quick save, there's even an option for that as well. This will load the last save, whether it's an auto, quick, or regular save. That one for me might be a little dangerous, so I find that just having one for the open system menu works better for me. I like having the open inventory on the top D-pad, the map on the bottom D-pad, the system on the right D-pad, and for the left, I like having the quest, so it goes right to that quest tab. And that is going to do it for me in this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that was helpful for you. There's settings that are kind of like on the nose, like, okay, I know that that's going to be in this game, but I think it's helpful to see these things before you're in your settings menu for almost an hour. I'm hoping to see some more options added at some point, just maybe not things that take away from the original experience of Oblivion. Something like a dead zone slider for your sensitivity settings might be helpful though. Thanks so much for watching once again, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.